Colonel Marcus Webb had seen 3 wars across 4 star systems, and nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought, until the day he found the lunchbox in the wreckage of Outpost 7. The station floated dead in space, with its hull torn open. Like paper, and Marcus and his salvage team moved through the debris, field scanning for survivors but finding only silence because the attack had come without warning, with no distress signal and no enemy ships detected, just total destruction. Private Katie Morris called out from the station mess hall telling Marcus he needed to see something, and Marcus pushed off a twisted bulkhead and floated toward her, and she held a small metal container that was unremarkable except for one detail, which was that it sat completely untouched while everything around it had been vaporized or melted or shredded, but the lunchbox remained pristine. In her gloved hands, and it was decorated with crude drawings of stars and moons. Katie told Marcus the box was cold, really cold, and her suit registered -40°C on contact, and Marcus took it from her. In the moment his gloves touched the metal, his visor flickered and strange symbols cascaded across his display, symbols that looked like musical notation mixed with geometric patterns, and they were not English or any human language he knew. He opened the container, and inside there was nothing, just a faint shimmer in the air like heat. Waves rising from summer asphalt, except this was cold, and when Marcus looked closer, he saw something impossible, because the interior of the box seemed deeper than the exterior dimensions allowed, and looking into it was like staring into a tunnel that went on forever, spiraling down into darkness speckled with distant lights. Then he heard the voice, and it was not sound exactly, but more like a memory of sound, a whisper that seemed to come from inside. His own skull and the words were alien, but somehow he understood them, and they said, "Find me before they do." Marcus snapped the lunchbox shut, and his heart hammered in his chest, which was a sensation he had not felt since his first combat drop 20 years ago, and he ordered Katie to bag it with level 5 containment and told her not to tell anyone what they found. Katie asked why, and Marcus said that was an order, and as they secured the lunchbox and prepared to leave, Marcus noticed something else, because scratched into the wall beside where the lunchbox had been found were 3 words in English written in a child handwriting that said, "Help her please back." On the human cruiser Valiant, Marcus locked himself in his quarters and opened the box again, and this time the voice was clearer and more desperate. And it said, "They are coming for all of you, and the veil has fallen, and find Kira before the hunt begins." The shimmer inside the box suddenly crystallized, and Marcus saw an image form in the darkness, showing a young woman no older than 20, with features that were almost human but not quite, because her ears tapered to delicate points, and her eyes held too many colors shifting between violet and gold and silver, and behind her, barely visible in the shadows, something massive stirred with scales and wings and ancient burning eyes. Marcus whispered, asking who she was, but the vision faded. Though not before he saw one more thing, because the girl was running terrified through a forest that looked wrong, with trees made of metal and crystal, and the sky burned with 3 suns. Marcus had spent his entire career fighting enemies of humanity, and he had never questioned his orders and never doubted the righteousness of human expansion across the stars. But as he stared into that impossible lunchbox, he realized everything he knew about the galaxy was about to change. According to every xenobiological survey humanity had ever conducted, elves did not exist and dragons were myth, and the coordinates his ship AI had just pulled from the lunchbox quantum signature led to a region of space marked on every star chart with a single warning that said, "None who enter return." Marcus closed the box and made his decision, because he had built his career on following orders, but some things were more important than the chain of command, and he opened a secure channel to his old squad mate, Lieutenant Amy Brooks, who now served on a deep space reconnaissance ship near the Galactic Rim. Marcus told Amy he needed a favor, and that she was going to think he had lost his mind. 3 days after finding the lunchbox, Marcus Webb went absent without leave, and he had stolen a fast courier ship called the Dawn Runner, which was small enough to slip past military scanners, and Amy Brooks had come through with the intel he needed, which included black market navigation charts of the Forbidden Reach, which was the region of space humanity had been warned never to explore by the Galactic Council. The Council was a coalition of 7 elder species, and they had been reluctant guides for humanity since first contact 30 years ago, and they had given Earth technology and trade routes, and one absolute rule, which was stay away from the Reach. And when human explorers asked why, the council representatives simply said, "There are powers in this galaxy that even we fear, and the Reach belongs to them." Marcus had always assumed it was politics or territorial, squabbling between ancient aliens, but now staring at the lunchbox strapped to his co-pilot seat, he was not so sure anymore. The voice had not spoken again, but the visions came every time he slept, showing Kira running through impossible forests and hiding in caves made of living crystal, and whispering to something massive in the darkness that rumbled with affection when she touched its scaled snout behind her. Always behind her were the hunters, and Marcus could not see them clearly in the visions, but he felt them, and they were cold and ancient and hungry. The Dawnrunner AI chirped, announcing they were approaching coordinates and warning of a sensor anomaly detected, and Marcus pulled back on the throttle as the ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel, and the viewport should have shown stars, but instead it showed a wall of absolute darkness. Marcus asked what he was looking at, and the AI said it was unknown because the anomaly was absorbing all electromagnetic radiation, and the AI read no stars and no cosmic background radiation, and nothing at all, as if space itself had been erased. Marcus drifted closer and realized the darkness was not empty, but full of something that existed in the gaps between light and in the silence. Between sounds, the lunchbox began to glow, and symbols etched themselves into the air around it. And they were the same strange geometric patterns from before, and they pointed toward the darkness like arrows showing a path. AI said, "Please tell me you are not thinking what I think you are thinking," and Marcus said he had made worse decisions. And the AI asked him to name one, and Marcus could not, but he gunned the engines anyway. The moment the Dawnrunner touched the darkness, reality twisted, and Marcus's stomach lurched as up became down and left became right, and time seemed to fold in on itself, and he saw himself entering the darkness, and saw himself already inside, and saw himself leaving decades older and scarred and changed. Then the darkness spat him out on the other side, and Marcus blinked because his view screen now showed a solar system, but not like any he had seen before, and the star at its center was silver, not yellow, and it cast shadows that moved independently of their sources, and the planets orbiting it were perfect geometric shapes, including a cube and a pyramid and a dodecahedron. Marcus whispered, asking where they were, and the AI replied, "Unknown," but said it was detecting life signs with hundreds of them and thousands all across the system. Marcus asked if they were human, and the AI said no. But the genetic markers were close, very close. The lunchbox flared brighter, and suddenly Marcus heard Kira's voice again, stronger than ever, saying, "You came, and oh, stars. You actually came," and they said no one would, and they said humans only cared about themselves. Marcus shouted at the empty cockpit, asking where she was, and Kira said, "Third planet, the one that looks like a cube, and there is a forest at the southern pole where the geometry breaks." And she said, "Hurry, because they are close, and they can smell the bond." Now Marcus asked, what bond and who was close? But the voice had gone. Silent again, Marcus set course for the cubic planet, and his mind raced, because every instinct told him this was a trap, and every bit of training screamed that he should turn around and report back to command, and let someone else handle this impossibility. But he had seen Kira's eyes in those visions, and he had seen the fear, yes, but also the hope, and the desperate, fragile hope that someone, anyone, would care enough to help. Marcus had spent 20 years fighting wars, and maybe it was time he tried saving someone instead. The Dawnrunner descended toward the impossible cube planet. Something massive moved in the silver star corona, and it had wings that spanned continents, and eyes that burned with ancient knowledge watched Marcus' ship fall toward the surface. And if a dragon could smile, it did, because the game, it seemed, had finally begun. Marcus's ship touched down in a clearing where the forest geometry gave up trying to make sense, and trees grew in spirals with their branches weaving through dimensions Marcus did not have names for, and the ground was solid beneath his boots. One moment, then transparent the next, revealing layers of earth and stone, and something that looked like crystallized time, and the sky was green, and gravity suggests the left was the new down. The AI reported environmental readings were impossible, with oxygen levels fluctuating between breathable and toxic in temperature, cycling from -20 to +40 every 3 seconds, and by all laws of physics, Marcus should be dead, Marcus said, and yet while checking his suit seals anyway, and he grabbed the lunchbox and secured it to his belt and stepped out into the madness. Moment his boots touched ground, the forest went still, and the impossible geometries froze, and the flickering gravity settled as reality had been waiting for him to arrive before deciding what rules to follow. Marcus called out for Kira, saying he was here, and there was silence then from somewhere. Deep in the twisted woods came a sound like wind chimes made of starlight. Marcus drew his plasma pistol and moved forward, and years of combat experience kept his breathing steady and his movements controlled, but nothing in his training had prepared him for a forest where the trees whispered in languages that hurt to hear and where shadows pooled like liquid mercury, and where the air tasted of copper and mathematics. He found her in a grove where 5 dimensions met, and Kira sat with her back against a tree that grew in all directions at once, with her arms wrapped around her knees and her pointed ears drooping with exhaustion, and she looked exactly like the visions, showing a young woman who was fragile and beautiful in a way that made Marcus think of old fairy tales his grandmother had told him, but it was the creature beside her that made Marcus freeze, because the dragon was small, no bigger than a horse, with its scales shifting through colors that did not exist in human perception, and when it breathed, frost and fire came out, simultaneously canceling each other into mist, and its eyes, ancient and knowing, fixed on Marcus with an intelligence that made him feel like an insect being examined under glass. Kira whispered, saying he was real, and she thought she was just going insane calling out into the void, but he was real. Marcus lowered his weapon slowly and said he found her lunchbox. Kira eyes widened, filling with tears, and she said that was her mother container, and her mother said if anything happened, and if the hunt ever found them, she should send it through the veil to find help, and Kira did not believe it would work because the veil had been closed for 3,000 years. Marcus asked who was hunting her, but before Kira could answer, the dragon head snapped up with its nostrils flaring, and it made a sound like thunder rolled backward, and suddenly Marcus understood why humanity had feared dragons in every ancient myth. Kira breathed, saying they were here, and oh stars, they were already here. The forest erupted, and figures emerged from the spaces between trees and from the gaps in reality itself, and they wore armor that seemed woven from darkness and starlight, and carried weapons that looked like frozen lightning, and their faces were hidden behind masks shaped like blank shields reflecting nothing and revealing nothing. One of them said, Kira Silverwood, you are bound for the harvest, and surrender the wormling, and your death will be painless. Kira said, standing, that the wormling stays with her, and Zephyr is hers, and the bond is sealed. The voice said the bond is illegal, and elves are property, and dragons are weapons, and you have violated the accord. Marcus stepped forward, putting himself between Kira and the hunters, saying he did not know what their accord was, but the girl said no, and that was all that matters. The hunters turned their blank masks toward him, and Marcus felt their attention like ice water down his spine. Said a human, and your species was warned, and the reach is forbidden to the young races. Marcus said, yeah, well. He had never been good at following rules. Marcus raised his plasma pistol and fired, and the bolt should have vaporized the hunter chest, but instead it passed through the figure as if it were smoke and struck a tree behind it, and the tree simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but erased, as if it had never been there at all. Marcus said, okay, that is Nuth the dragon. Zephyr roared, and it was such a small creature, but the sound shook the forest to its roots, and reality rippled outward from its maw, and suddenly Marcus was seeing in 4 dimensions, and 5 and 6, and he watched the hunters move through time as well as space, and saw them attacking from past and future simultaneously. Kira screamed, telling him to take her hand, and Marcus did not think, and he grabbed her hand. Power surged through him like lightning and like fire and like ice, and for one impossible moment, Marcus understood, and he saw the bond between Kira and Zephyr, which was a connection that transcended species and physics, and he saw the truth about elves, because they were not aliens, but were the first species in the galaxy to have bonded with dragons and to have merged their souls with beings of pure possibility, and he saw why the hunt existed, and why the Galactic Council feared this place, because dragons did not follow the laws of reality, and anything bonded to a dragon became Dangerous to the ancient powers who had carved up the galaxy among themselves, Kira pulled him onto Zephyr back, and the dragon scales felt like warm glass under Marcus's hands. Kira said, "Hold on, and whatever you do, do not let go, because if you break contact with me, you will fall through the veil and end up scattered across 17 dimensions." Said she could have led with that information. Zephyr launched into the air with its wings beating through layers of reality. Marcus could not see but could feel, and the hunters gave chase with their weapons, firing bolts of unlight that erased chunks of space. Itself, Marcus shouted over the wind, asking where they were going. Kira shouted back, saying, "Away from here," and her people were scattered across the reach, hiding from the hunt. But there was a place, a sanctuary, where even the hunters could not go. And if they could reach it, and if they could wake the Guardian, then maybe they had. Chance Marcus asked what Guardian Kira grip on Zephyr tightened, and she said, "The last of the Elder Wyrms and the dragon who remembers the galaxy before the Accord. And if anyone can stop the hunt, it is her." Marcus looked back, and the hunters were gaining with their forms flickering through time, and he saw one of them reach out and saw its hand stretch across seconds, about to grab Zephyr tail. Marcus did the only thing he could think of, and he pulled the lunchbox from his belt and threw it. The box tumbled through the air, and the moment the hunter touched it, the creature froze, and its mask cracked, and behind it Marcus glimpsed something terrible, which was not a face, but an absence of face, and a void where identity should have been. Hunter screamed with a sound that curdled reality itself, and then it simply unwound with its atoms, separating and spreading across space and time until there was nothing left. Marcus gasped, asking, "What was that thing?" Kira said quietly, "It was her mother's last gift, and she trapped a piece of her soul inside, along with a curse, and anyone who touches it with the intent to harm sees the truth about themselves. And the hunters cannot survive truth because they are built on lies, and on the story that some species are worth more than 20 something, because he had come to rescue one girl, but he had stumbled into something much bigger, which was a war that had been fought in the shadows for thousands of years, and a war between those who believed in freedom and those who believed in control, and somehow impossibly humanity had just picked a side. Marcus said, "Tell me about this. Guardian, tell me we are not about to wake up something worse than the hunters." Kira smiled, sad and knowing, and said she could not promise that, but she could promise this, which was whatever comes next, it will be the truth. And sometimes that is all you can ask, for behind them more hunters materialized, with dozens of them and hundreds, because the hunt had fully deployed. Head the mountains sang with ancient power, and Marcus Webb, who was a colonel of the human military and an absent without leave soldier and an accidental dragon rider, realized his war had only just begun. The mountain was alive, and Marcus felt it the moment Zephyr landed on the crystalline plateau, because the stone hummed with a frequency that resonated in his bones, and patterns of light pulsed beneath the surface like neural pathways in a vast, sleeping brain. Marcus asked how old this place was while sliding off Zephyr back, and his legs trembled from the flight and from the adrenaline and from the sheer impossibility of everything. Kira said, "Old enough that it remembers when galaxies were young," and she pressed her palm against the stone, and the light responded, flowing toward her touch like a curious animal, and she said, "This is sanctuary, in the last place the Accord cannot touch." Marcus asked why not. Kira said, "Because the Guardian made a bargain with reality itself, and this mountain exists in all timelines simultaneously, and to destroy it, the hunters would have to erase every possible version of history, and even they are not powerful enough for that." The plateau trembled, and Zephyr chirped nervously, pressing close to Kira. Marcus said, checking his rifle, that they were coming, though he knew his weapons were designed to fight enemies that obeyed physics. Kira said, "Let them come," and she walked to the center of the plateau, where a massive door was carved into the mountain face, and the door was covered in symbols that hurt to look at directly, with words written in a language that predated language itself. And she said it was time someone reminded the hunt why dragons were never conquered but only convinced to sleep. Marcus asked if she was going to wake it and wake the Elder Wyrm. Kira nodded, and her hand moved to the door, then hesitated, and she said her mother died protecting her from the hunt, and her mother was one of the last elf-born mages bonded to a dragon named Starfire, and they held off an entire
a legion
so she could escape with Zephyr, and her voice cracked as she said she was 11 years old, and for 9 years she had been running and hiding, and too scared to fight back. But Marcus came, and a human from a species that barely knows. The stars came because she asked, and if he can be that brave, then so can she. She placed her palm on the door, and the mountain screamed, though it was not a scream but a song with a note so deep and vast that Marcus felt it more than heard it. And the symbols on the door ignited with silver fire, and the stone began to move, grinding open to reveal darkness beyond, and from that darkness came a presence that made Zephyr look like a candle next to a starry voice asked, "Who disturbs my rest, and who dares wake the last witness?" And the voice was female and ancient and patient as erosion. Kira said with her voice steady that she does, and she is Kira Silverwood, daughter of Mara Silverwood, and heir to the line of first bonding, and she claimed sanctuary under the old accord before the hunters twisted it into chains. There was silence then from the darkness too. Eyes opened, and they were the size of houses burning with the cold light of distant supernovas. The voice said the line of first bonding died 300 years ago, and Mara was the last. And Mara fell, Kira said. Mara was her mother, and before she fell, she taught her the old words, and the true words, and Kira closed her eyes and spoke in a language that made Marcus, translator and plants, scream and shut down, because the words tasted of starlight and sacrifice and of promises made when the universe was young. The eyes in the darkness softened, and the voice said, "It sees," and Kira carries her mother's soul echo, and she brings a human in there. It was curiosity in that ancient voice now, and something else like hope in the voice. Said it has been 30 millennia since a human last stood before me, and not since the time before the forgetting, when your kind walked between stars as easily as breathing. Marcus blinked, asking what, because humans have only been in space for 30 years. The Guardian interrupted, saying 430 years of this cycle, but you are an old species, Marcus Webb, and older than you know, and the Accord saw to that before Marcus could process this revelation. The sky above the plateau split open, and the hunters had arrived, not dozens now, but thousands, with their blank masks reflecting nothing and their weapons crackling with reality, shredding power. One hunter announced that Kira Silverwood was in violation of the harvest decree and surrender, or be erased. The Guardian finally stepped fully into view, and she was magnificent and terrible, with a dragon the size of a city block, and her scales shimmering through colors that did not exist in standard physics. And when she spread her wings, Alcas saw galaxies caught in the webbing, with tiny universes birthed and dying in the span of seconds. The Guardian said, erased, and how delightfully arrogant. And she asked if they know what she is, and she said she is Valestra, last witness to the first treaty, and she watched their masters bind the dragons to their will, and she watched them lobotomize humanity and cast them down to primitive mud dwellers, and she watched them turn the elfborn into cattle, and she said nothing because she was promised peace. The hunters raised their weapons. Valestra continued, saying, but she grows tired of peace built on slavery, and her eyes fixed on Kira and Zephyr, and she asked the child, if she grants her power, will she use it wisely, and will she fight not for revenge, but for freedom? Kira met the dragon gaze without flinching, and said she, will. Valestra asked, and you human, because your kind was robbed of your birthright and reduced to pawns in a game you do not remember playing, and will you help restore what was taken? Marcus thought about the lunchbox, and about Kira's desperate message cast into the void, and about the truth that humanity had been fed comfortable lies for 30 years. Marcus said, yeah, he is in Valestra, smiled, revealing teeth that could crack planets, and said, then let us remind the galaxy what it means to wake a dragon. Sheet roared and reality shattered. Marcus felt something unlock inside him, like a door he never knew existed, suddenly swinging open, and memories flooded in, but they were not his memories, because they were older and deeper, with genetic knowledge passed down through millions of years of human evolution. And he remembered the stars not as distant lights to be reached with ships, but as waypoints in a vast network humans had once traversed with just their minds. Humanity had not discovered space travel 30 years ago, but had rediscovered it after the Accord had stolen it away. Marcus whispered, oh God, asking what did they do to US Velstra, said they made you forget because humans bonded to dragons were unstoppable, and your species was too dangerous and too free, so they broke you and rewrote your history and locked your potential behind. Genetic change, she turned to Kira, saying, but the Elfborn remembered, and they kept the old ways alive, hidden in stories and songs, and they are the bridge between what was and what could be. Again Valestra Claw touched Kira's chest then. Marcus and light exploded through them. Both Marcus felt it happen, and felt the bond form not between him and Zephyr, but between him and Kira and Zephyr and Valestra, with all of them connected in a web of power and purpose, and he could feel Kira fear and determination, and he could feel Zephyr fierce protectiveness, and he could feel Valestra ancient sorrow and burning hope, and he could feel the hunter's terror. The lead hunter said no, and this is impossible because humans cannot bond, and the chains are in place. Valestra said simply, they are broken. The hunters attacked, and Marcus raised his hand, not sure what he was doing, just knowing he needed to act, and reality bent around his will, and the hunter weapon disintegrated mid-fire with its atoms, simply deciding to be something else, and to be flowers with strange, impossible flowers that bloomed in vacuum and sang with mathematical precision. Kira moved like lightning with Zephyr at her side, and where they passed, hunters flickered and fell with their masks cracking and revealing the emptiness beneath, because they were not beings but were tools and constructs created by the Accord to enforce rules that benefited only the powerful, and tools could be broken. The battle raged across multiple dimensions, and Marcus fought beside Kira with their bond allowing them to move in perfect synchronization. And when he zigged through space, she zagged through time, and when she unleashed flame, he froze reality around it, creating weapons of pure contradiction. But more hunters kept coming with thousands and tens of thousands because the Accord was mobilizing its full might. Marcus said, his power already flagging that we cannot win this because the bond was new and unstable, and he was not used to bending reality with just his thoughts. Kira said, we do not need to win, and we just need to survive long enough. Marcus asked, long enough for what? Valestra laughed, shook the mountain, and she said, long enough for me to send a message, human, and a message to every dragon sleeping in forgotten corners of the galaxy, and a message to every Elfborn hiding in fear, and a message to every human who has ever looked at the stars and felt like they were missing something. The Elder Worm spread her wings wide and roared again, but this time it was not an attack, but was a song and a call and an invitation. And across the galaxy, in caves and sanctuaries and quiet corners of space, dragons began to wake, and Elfborn felt the pull of ancient magic stirring in their blood, and humans who were ordinary humans would never question their place in the galaxy suddenly They remembered flying. The hunt faltered, and the hunters looked at each other and at the sky and at the mountain where an impossible dragon sang an impossible song, and they retreated, not defeated, not yet, but uncertain, and uncertainty was a crack in their blank masks that nothing could repair. As the last hunters vanished, Kira collapsed against Zephyr, exhausted, and Marcus caught her before she fell. 6 months after Sanctuary, the galaxy was burning, not literally, though there were plenty of actual fires, but the careful order the Accord had maintained for 30,000 years was crumbling, and its architects were discovering that systems built on lies collapse fast once the truth gets loose. Marcus stood in the command center of Freehold Station, watching reports flood in from across known space, and the station was a repurposed mining facility that orbited a dead star at the edge of the Reach, and it had become the beating heart of what people were calling the Awakening. Lieutenant Amy Brooks reported that 3 more Elfborn enclaves had declared independence, and she had been one of the first humans to answer Marcus's call, abandoning her post to join what many in the human military still called a terrorist movement. And she said that the Accord was trying to blockade them, but 2 dragon clans had broken their shackles and were running interference. Marcus asked about casualties. Amy said, minimal on our side, and the Accord forces are confused because they are trained to fight conventional battles, not enemies who can bend space-time. Marcus nodded, but the victory felt hollow because every day brought new allies, yes, but also new horrors, and the Accord was not just fighting back but was purging with entire Elfborn settlements sterilized from orbit and human Colonies that showed signs of remembering were quarantined with their populations fed sedatives designed to suppress the genetic memories awakening in their DNA. And dragons once caught were not killed, but were broken and lobotomized and turned into weapons for the PHR. Armis Marcus asked where Kira was, and me said council chamber, and she is arguing with the Imberscale clan again. Marcus sighed because building a revolution was messy and dragons were proud and elf-born were fractured into 1,000 subcultures, and humans were still struggling to accept that their entire history was a fabrication. And getting them all to work together was like herding cats made of existential crisis, he found. Kira in the middle of a heated debate with 3 dragons in their humanoid forms, which was a courtesy they extended when dealing with the small folk. Though their barely suppressed irritation was obvious, Kira was saying with her voice tight with frustration that she was not asking them to die for her, but asking them to remember what they were before the Accord broke them, because they were free. And they flew where they wanted and bonded with who they chose. Lord Ashenmaw, eldest of the Imberscaled clan, interrupted, and in human form. He looked like an elderly gentleman with silver hair and eyes that held volcanic fire, and he said and nearly destroyed the galaxy doing it, because the wars before the Accord were apocalyptic, with entire star systems rendered uninhabitable and species driven to extinction because bonded pairs decided their love justified genocide, and the Accord brought peace. Kira said the Accord brought slavery. Marcus stepped into the room saying peace built on chains is not peace, but is just well-organized oppression. Ashenmaw turned his burning gaze on Marcus, saying, "You have been awake for half a year, human, and you presume to lecture me on history spanning millennia, because your kind caused half those ancient wars, and humans bonded to dragons, became gods, and gods are rarely benevolent." Marcus conceded maybe, but said at least we would be choosing our mistakes. Instead of having someone else order forced on us before Ashenmaw could respond, alarms shrieked through the station, and Amy voice crackled over the intercom saying, "We have incoming and Accord battle fleet with 12 capital ships and 70 support craft, and they are not negotiating, and they are not even hailing, and they are just coming." The lights went out, and emergency power kicked in, bathing the council chamber in red. Kira eyes met Marcus, and in the months since Sanctuary their bond had deepened, and he could feel her fear now and the determination underneath it, and they both knew this day would come, because the Accord could not let Freehold stand, as it represented everything they had worked to suppress, which was freedom and choice and memory. Marcus said, "Get everyone to the evacuation pods, and Valestra and Zephyr, and he will buy time." Kira grabbed his arm, saying, "No, and we fight together, because that is the whole point of bonding, and we are stronger together." Shma watched them with something shifting in his ancient eyes, and he said, "That bond between you and human and elfborn and wormling." And he had not seen one form naturally in 3,000 years, because the Accord ensured humans lacked the genetics key, and most elfborn lost the knowledge, and yet here you stand bonded as perfectly as in the old days. Kira said, "The old ways are not dead, but we're just waiting." The station shuddered as the first impacts hit the shields and through the viewport. Marcus saw the Accord fleet materialize from faster-than-light travel, with their ships sleek and terrible, and designed to inspire fear. But then he saw something else, because ships were appearing behind the Accord fleet with dozens of them, and human military vessels going absent without leave like he had, and elfborn cruisers with their organic hulls pulsing with bioluminescence, and between them flying with wings that spanned kilometers were dragons by the hundreds. Marcus breathed, asking, "What is happening?" Amy voice crackled with static and something that might have been tears, saying, "Boss, you need to see this, because every message you sent, and every human you woke up, and every elfborn you helped remember, they heard you, and they are here." And all of them, the com channels lit up with voices saying, "This is Captain Lisa Morgan of Human Ship, defiant, declaring independence from the Accord puppet government and standing with Freehold." Another voice said, "Silverwine clan reporting." "And our wings are yours, Kira Silverwood, as they were your mother." Another said, "Somebody get me in this fight, because I've been sleeping 3,000 years and hungry for Accord blood." And on ship after ship and dragon after dragon declaring themselves. Freeshamaw stood slowly, and his human form rippled and expanded and transformed, and within seconds a 50-meter dragon stood where the elderly gentleman had been, with scales like cooled magma and eyes like dying sunsession. Ma said, "You shame me, child, and you and your human reminded me what I traded away for safety, which was my pride and my choice, and my fire, and his wings. Spread cracking through the council chamber ceiling like it was paper, and he said, "Ember Scale Clan, awaken because the time of cowering is over." The response was immediate, and across the station, and in ships nearby, dragons erupted from their humanoid disguises because the Ember Scale Clan was one of the oldest, largest dragon families in the galaxy, and when they roared in unison, reality itself seemed to flinch. Marcus felt the bond between him and Kira and Zephyr pulse with power, and Lestra presence thrummed at the edge of his consciousness. Vast and approving, Marcus asked Kira if she was ready. She smiled, fierce and bright, saying, "Let us show them what freedom looks like." They ran for the hangarware. Zephyr waited, and the young dragon had grown over the past months, now large enough to carry 3 riders comfortably, and as they climbed onto her back, Marcus felt the fear trying to creep in, because this was not just a skirmish, but was the war, and the one that would decide whether the galaxy moved forward into genuine freedom or backward into more sophisticated chains. Zephyr launched from the hangar into space, and vacuum should have killed them instantly, but the bond wrapped them in a bubble of warped reality, and Marcus breathed stardust and void, feeling more alive than he had ever felt in atmosphere. The battle was chaos incarnate, with Accord ships firing weapons that erased space itself, creating temporary holes in reality, but the rebel fleet countered with creativity in their tactics. Unpredictable and unbound by doctrine, and humans fought with desperate courage and Elfborn wove spells that turned missiles into flowers, and that made shields sing themselves to sleep, and dragons were magnificent, dancing between laser fire and breathing plasma that burned hotter than stars, and roaring songs that unmade Accord weapons. At the molecular level, Marcus fought beside Kira with their minds linked through the bond, and when she thought left, he dodged left, and when he imagined shields, she manifested them, and they moved as one being, split across 2 bodies in Zephyr. Was their wings and their claws and their fire, and Accord dreadnought targeted them, charging a weapon that looked like a captured black hole, and Marcus felt the weapon in tension, which was total annihilation, with no escape and no survival. Marcus shouted Kira name. She said she knows, and hold on. She reached deep into the bond, deeper than they had ever gone, and Marcus felt Valestra presence surge forward with the Elder Worm, lending them power across the light years, and together, human and elf-born and wormling and ancient dragon, they pushed Triality inverted and the dreadnought. Weapon fired, but the black hole turned side out, becoming a white hole that vomited pure creation instead of destruction, and new matter exploded outward. Harmless but blinding, and when the light cleared, the dreadnought weapon was gone, just gone, as if it had never existed. Accord fleet faltered, because they had come expecting an easy slaughter, but found a storm Marcus broadcast on open channels, saying all ships and all dragons and all elf-born, because they are confused, so press the attack. But then the sky split open, and something vast beyond measure entered the battlefield. And it was not a ship, but an entity and a construct and a being. A pure Accord ideology given form, and it looked like a geometric impossibility, with angles that stabbed the mind and surfaces that reflected nothing because there was nothing in them to reflect,